we can do. Okay. I'm here with John Parrish, and he is the resident health and exercise science student who is going to talk to us today about how everyday people can incorporate elite training into their different workout methods, I guess. So what exactly do you define as elite training?
So elite training, the way I define it, is training methods generally used by elite level athletes to become like the best at what they do. And so there's different types, and they're all generally specific. Whereas like a professional soccer player would train specific to his needs, and a high level shot putter would train specific to their needs.
Got it. So what do you mean by like everyday people? Like define what you mean by people. Do you mean people with athletic backgrounds or people who just regularly go to the gym?
Oh no, I fully mean everyone can do this kind of stuff. The reason that they are the best in the world is because they train the best, and they have the best methods of training, and so many people have devoted hours, or maybe even years, decades of their lives to come up with the best ways to train, and we can benefit from that too. Like, since it is the best way to train, it's not just the best way to train for them. I mean, like, depending on what your goal is, there is probably a method that has been researched, tried, and true that can benefit you as well.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these methods. Like, what are some of the ways that people can reach that elite level of training?
Well, it completely depends on what you want to do. There's 100% different ways to train muscular hypertrophy, muscular strength, muscular explosiveness, speed, aerobic speed, anaerobic capacity, aerobic capacity, general flexibility, and nutrition. I mean, like you can go into any of these aspects, and there is tons and tons of research on all of those, if not incorporating each one across different what's the word across different fields of study.
So why don't you walk me through one of these workouts? Like, what would you do typically for either like a bench day or a squat day or deadlifts, like as far as big motions are concerned?
Well, funny you should say that. One of the research articles that I have reviewed recently looked at the differences between doing training explosively for back squat and training for strength in back squat. What it came down to really was the rep range and the percentage of your one rep max really made the difference between how you what the stimulus was that you got from that workout. So to be clear, let's say you're working with 95% of your one rep max. What's going to happen when you do that is each rep you go through, let's say you're doing 5 reps of your 95%, which is a lot, maybe 90%, but it's still a lot for 5 reps. What's going to happen is you are going to go through that set, and each rep is going to get slower and slower and slower. And this is completely due to the force velocity curve that says as things get heavier, you're going to move it slower, which is fine, and it has its place. The place that comes in is moving that load for that many reps helps you recruit more muscle fibers, and so you are but by the end of that by the end of the set, you're using all of your muscle fibers throughout the workout, instead of just using a few that are easy to recruit. And so you're training yourself to recruit more muscle fibers and getting stronger through the recruitment of all the muscle fibers. And generally, if you do a movement, you won't necessarily get all of the muscle fibers firing. It has to be trained. And generally, how you recruit more muscle fibers is by training heavy, training in large compound movements, and directing force across the entirety of the movement. On the other hand, the same study looked at the effects of training with loads of sub 80%, And the goal of that was to look at the back squat and see what the effects were if you squatted with 80%, but you maintained your speed of each rep. And so when I say the speed of each rep, I mean on the concentric motion of the movement, you maintained your meters per second as the exercise went on. And so throughout the workout, through the sets, through the reps, every single rep was as fast as possible. What this stimulated was lots and lots of explosive movements, mainly like going back to the force velocity, I don't want to say explosive movements, explosive stimulus. So going back to the force velocity curve, moving light things, you can move them a lot faster, obviously, but still training under that heavy load, but still being able to move it really fast trains you to move fast. And so the faster you train to move, the faster you'll move once you take the weight off your back. And so, how we use that is using these squats that are submaximal as fast as possible to elicit the most explosive response. So, how does this affect regular people? Well, simply put, doing heavy and lighter squat movements together in a generally well thought out program. A generally well thought out program would mean that that you train heavy, you develop the motor recruitment that you actually need, and then as you progress through your program, you're going to move into more explosive movements, so that all those muscle fibers that you have trained through the beginning of your program, you can actually use those to be stronger, faster later down the road. And so why, I guess coming back to the why do regular people need this? Well, being athletic, being strong, being powerful, is very important. Especially like young, when you're young, later on in life, doing general things. I had a conversation with a guy one time about what is a functional movement. We hear that term a lot, functional movements. So what is a functional movement? Well, essentially, a functional movement is anything that makes you better at functional things. So what are functional things? Being able to pick stuff up, being able to carry stuff, being able to bend, being able to be flexible, being able to move through general ranges of motion that you're always going to need. But how you get better at those functional movements is generally being stronger. There's nothing not functional about being able to pick up groceries. There's nothing not functional about being able to move things around the house. There's nothing not functional about being better at like picking up kids, picking up somebody that needs to be lifted. There's so many things that this can be applied to, and that is functional strength. But what can really help that is training your overall strength and training your explosive strength. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
It's a lot, but yeah. So kind of going back a little bit, obviously the program is like 90% of what it takes to be on its elite level and kind of, like you said, work on their functionality. But on the other end of that spectrum, we also have nutrition. So a lot of everyday people are super busy and don't have time to just sit in the gym and kind of bang out 2 hours worth of workouts. So what do you suggest for somebody that doesn't have all that time?
Well, generally, the first thing that elite athletes look at is going off their needs, and so doing a needs analysis of your diet is really where elite athletes start. And so this time I'll try to be better at tying everything back into how it really applies to everybody. But athletes like ultra long distance runners are going to have much different diet needs than somebody who does short and fast sprints. Completely different energy systems. So your computer is going black on us there. All right. So training the energy systems. You have to look at what you need. And so what the elite athletes do, and the elite coaches and the elite nutritionists, is they look at what the athlete needs energy system-wise to perform at their best. And so, of course, we have the three energy systems. We have the creatine phosphate, we have the the anaerobic glycolytic lactate system, and we also have the aerobic oxidative. And so, generally, in most sports, we see that there is a mix of mostly glycolytic and some aerobic, so aerobic oxidative. And so, training based on eating based on what you need to train is generally how the elite athletes do it. They take an inventory of what they do throughout the day. They take an inventory of what they need to perform at their best, and then they put that in diet. And so, what we see a lot of glycolytic athletes need is they need a lot of carbohydrates to fuel that glycolytic system. And so, that can be different across the board. Maybe the athletes that are more inclined to super long distance, maybe marathoners, even on out to ultra marathoners. Those guys, what we're seeing now in a lot of the better guys in the world, are switching to more high-fat, low-carb diets because of the oxidative system can burn fat for longer, and they don't need as many carbohydrates to fuel them along. They say that the body's carbohydrate storage, I think, can only get you like a couple 100 miles before you completely run out. However, the average person, I believe, it has 300,000 miles worth of fat on the body. And so if you were just to liberate all of your fat stores on your body, the average person would have 300,000 miles worth of fuel. And so, pushing these long-distance athletes out towards the new extremes of high-fat, low-carb diets is getting more and more popular. And so, how do we bring this all back in? Well, general people have to take a look at what they're doing. And so, if they are not very active, if they are active, what are they doing? Are they active in lifting weights? Are they active in running short distances? Are they active in hiking? Are they active in picking things up in a manual labor job? All these things need to be considered when making a diet. And so what we can tell from the elite level athletes is the more that you either A, push long distances in elite athletes, or B, don't do a lot of explosive, fast movements, you're probably going to need more, fat in your diet. You can go more low carb, and you can make a lot of healthy progress that way. But on the other side, if you're a normal person that works out, they are active, in an active lifestyle, they maybe work a manual labor job. Those are similar in caloric and energy needs as glycolytic athletes, and so we can build our diets around what we need. So, does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so going back to talking about kind of just this whole idea of training like an elite athlete, what are some of the common misconceptions of training at this level?
Yeah, well, like the common misconceptions, like first and foremost is that that if you're a normal person that you shouldn't do it. Like as I said before, the elite athletes train elite because it's the best way to train. And generally, if you can find what you're into or what your goals are, there's probably a best way already made. And so we don't have to look any further than to look at how the best train and try to mimic that or create something that fits our lifestyle. And so that's the first misconception. I would say the second misconception is that it's too hard. Not necessarily. I mean, you can definitely scale things back to make it accessible for anybody. Like obviously, you're not going to just go train like the the best football players or best soccer players in the world straight off the bat. But what you can do is take those same principles and apply those to your routine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, So for your routine, obviously you've talked a lot about lifting and kind of a program set towards building functional strength and stuff. But what about the other side? What about conditioning? Like how does training like an elite athlete? Obviously there's a lot of endurance in it. You're talking about ultra runners. So as far as conditioning, how does that really kind of affect the everyday person?
Oh, absolutely. I think that comes back to some misconceptions. Is that the best way to train for endurance is just run. And so when looking through the when looking online and looking through magazines, there's just not a lot of ton of like research driven data that supports different ways to train other than like what people like to do. And so I think a lot of the industry that we see now is geared around what people like to do and what people buy into. But there's so much more than just the standard get on the treadmill and run. There's so much more than just get on the bike and go. I would say most of the high level athlete strength conditioning is based around that aspect. Is the conditioning. One of the coolest things I've ever seen was a quote from a study looking at max aerobic conditioning. Like looking at max aerobic speed and how to train over that. It said that generally the teams that win games are the fastest in the end. And you think, okay, that makes sense. But really thinking, like diving into it, the teams that are the most well conditioned will be faster at the end. And so, relating that back to how everyday people can do things is there's totally more than one way to condition. As I said, like generally most of the research is driven around the actual aerobic conditioning. I think one of the coolest things now is the introduction of high intensity interval training. That's something that was previously only done by elite athletes. I think we're starting to see it more and more. But I believe the education aspect is still lacking in a lot of these methods. One of the best I think that there's ever been was Tabata, created by a Japanese Olympic speed training coach about 20 years ago, and the goal was to push the athletes over their maximum aerobic speed, which is the threshold of speed where running or whatever you're doing becomes anaerobic rather than aerobic. The goal was to push them over that limit for 20 seconds, pull them back off for 10, and rest, and then 20 seconds again, 10 seconds again for rest. This is an excellent way to push conditioning into the glycolytic realm rather than the oxidative realm. And so conditioning is specific. There's ways to train other than just getting on a treadmill and running slow for a long period of time. Conditioning isn't just working in the oxidative realm. You can come back and condition in the glycolytic realm. And that's where I think that the elite, the elite training protocols, are really starting to break ground. Is that you can not only work out and lift in a glycolytic state, but you can also condition in a glycolytic capacity, and may even condition in a creatine phosphate way. So creatine phosphate, for a long time, people thought the best way to do that is just to squat heavy, to bench really heavy for very few reps, or maybe do some very explosive, barbell movements like power cleans and snatches, overhead presses, things like that. But not necessarily. You can build your capacity conditioning-wise in those with maximum effort medicine ball throws. Super easy ways to condition that stimulus, and I think that's where the elite level training, really shows the rest of the world what can be done. Is there's always somebody trying to find the best way to train, best way to condition, and so we should look no further than the elite level athletes and coaches.
Great. Speaking of coaches, this might be a little off topic. I know you are the assistant strength and conditioning coach for the Syracuse men's lacrosse team.
That's
so,
correct. Yeah.
how have you kind of applied these methods to some lacrosse boys? Obviously, they're having a much better season than they did last year. So, do you think that applying these elite level training techniques, although they aren't everyday people, but they're the college student, they're going to school, they are coming in to train twice a week, but really that and playing lacrosse are kind of their only focuses. So how does this elite level training kind of help bring them in and focus for those 2 hours that they get a week to train?
Yeah, I think that is a fair assessment. That this year something is different. I think the introduction of Coach Mike Misson is probably the biggest difference. He also fully believes in the training the energy system approach. And training the energy system is incredibly important. You don't want to train energy systems that do not relate to what you're doing. You only have so much energy to give to something throughout the day. So really filling that cup, if you will, with things that are really going to help you are key. And so if you only have limited space to fit in with training, you want to fit in things that are relevant. So looking at lacrosse players, of course you have different positions, but if you really watch one guy on the field, they stand around a lot. Let's say attackman, for example. A good example would be Bradley Boyd. Brad's one of the leading scorers this year.
32 goals this season.
32 goals this season. Go Brad. If you watch him, when the ball is around him, he is running here, there, everywhere. He's running around the goal, trying to find a way into trying to find a way to get the ball into the goal, of course. But there's 80 seconds on a shot clock, and so for 80 seconds he's running around. But there's 60 minutes in the game, and so if you look at what's going on when the ball is around him, and everybody else for that matter, there's a lot of standing around, and so taking the entire thing into consideration, what does it mean to condition a lacrosse player? Well, you could break it down in different fractions based on different positions. But let's say if you're working at if you're working 1/6 of the overall time that you're given, then that's a similar you should train similarly, as in a given time frame, you should condition specific to what you're doing. So let's say you're only of the 60 minutes, you're only running around for 10 minutes, right? Like that's an entire average game. So your training will probably look like 12 to 15 minutes of high intensity training, followed by long rest periods, right? And so you get 15 minutes to work. You could easily do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, 30 seconds on, a very high intensity 1 minute off. These are all very good ways to train that are specific to what the lacrosse guys need. What they don't need is a lot of heavy lifting, or like I want to say very very heavy lifting that is going to tax their body and make them not as fast later on. As I said before, that training very heavy and the force velocity curve. If you're training super heavy, you're probably going to move slow. So we don't want to get these guys to train slow. There's a time and place for that is not in the season right now. If there was a time for that, it's very, very, very preseason, like to build their overall capacity for strength. So you also don't need them running, running long distances, is because they don't do that. And also there is a like the person who can run the fastest at the end of the game is probably going to win the game. And so if speed is what you take from that, then speed is what you want to train. So running those guys around, around the track and for laps over and over and over again is not going to get them any better at lacrosse. A reason being is you're really training them to be slower. Dr. Zach DeChant from Texas Christian University, baseball strength conditioning coach, has a chart that lays out this no-go zone, if you will, in sprinting. Um, if you're training at 95% of your overall speed, you're actually training to get faster. If you're training at less than 70%, you're in this recovery side of running. But between 70 and 95% is this no-go zone that if you're running in it, if you're running speed-wise in this zone, you're actually not getting any faster and you're not recovering. And so you're actually training to be slower and you're not recovering. And so having the guys running in that zone, applies to this as well. As like we want them to be as fast as possible because speed wins games, 100%. And we also don't want them in that zone to where they're training to be slower. So I think training the energy system is also super important with these guys. They're highly glycolytic, just like a traditional workout. They hit things really hard for a short period of time, and then they rest for a little bit, and then they do it again. They work really, really hard, and then they rest, and they work really, really hard, and then they rest. So training that glycolytic system is very important. So we can bring this thing full circle with the lacrosse guys. They need speed. They need repeatability. And so training them in a glycolytic way to where they're using carbohydrates for fuel is super important. That's going to help them win games. And their modes of conditioning are also super important. So
great. Okay, I'm going to flip the switch. So
all right.
On the other end of the spectrum, you're also in the Army, and that's more of an endurance thing, and then I would definitely have to say it's more heavy lifting than kind of lacrosse. So how does this type of workout kind of enhance your training for the Army and for their PT tests and the eventual tasks you'll have to do?
Great question. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot. This is a good time to ask this question, and the reason I say that is because October of this year we are officially unveiling the Army Combat Fitness Test, which is going to replace the Army Physical Fitness Test. For almost 40 years, we've had a physical fitness test that measures purely muscular endurance on the far end, and running aerobic capacity on the far end too. So we had 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. These are all things that push the far ends of muscular endurance and push the envelope on oxidative capacity. So moving from that to the Army Combat Fitness Test, which is comprised of a deadlift for 3 rep max, a hand release push-up, which is when you come all the way up, all the way down, touch your chest to the ground, release your hands off the ground, and press back up for max reps. A medicine ball toss for maximum distance. A sandbag carry, a sandbag drag, carry, and sprint all in one. A knee tuck, which is a pull-up on a pull-up bar. Pull up, bring your knees up to your elbows, bring them back down, and let's cap this all off with a 2-mile run. And
wow, so that's like a complete 180 from the PT test.
Definitely. And so like the needs of tactical athletes, or what we're starting to refer soldiers to, is unlike any other requirement in the world. You need people who are strong, fast, and can do things for a long period of time. And so what the old Army Physical Fitness Test did not do was measure overall strength and overall maximum glycolytic function. It measured the far ends of the anaerobic endurance and scratch the surface with the aerobic capacity. But what it means now is going back to the energy system training. It says the Army Combat Fitness Test really is looking at where you're weak in those areas. If you're weak in strength, you're not going to be able to pull someone off the battlefield. If you're weak in strength, you're not going to be able to carry your own weight. You're not going to be able to lift heavy things, which the Army is full of. It's full of a lot of heavy, big metal things. If you don't have muscular endurance, you won't be able to do intense things for short to long periods of time. Combat is probably one of the best testers of muscular endurance. You're carrying heavy things very fast, constantly moving around, changing position, and looking for the best way to keep yourself safe and keep others safe as well. And the aerobic endurance side, we're looking at how long can you do things, period. Your recovery between bouts of high intensity things, high intensity, whether it runs, sprints, carries, all those things will be affected by your aerobic capacity. So bringing it all full circle is it shows where you're weak. With Army Combat Fitness Test, if you're weak in the overhead throw, or you're weak in the deadlift, you're probably weak in your creatine phosphate area, where you just need to get stronger. You need to probably get in the gym, lift some weights, get stronger, and be a better soldier. If you're weak in the muscular endurance, you just need to get back into the gym or find some space and do some push-ups and do things that really stress your muscular endurance systems. And if you're weak in your aerobic capacity, probably just need to get there and run. And so it's an assessment for us to see where people are weak, and the less weaknesses we have, the better Army, the better soldier we're going to have.
Great. So a lot of these, going back to your plan for the elite athletes, going and applying to everyday people, to be honest, a lot of these people that are applying active duty for the Army aren't the top athletes in their class. For the most part, they're not the top athletes, and they're kind of the in-between, where they're not quite the fittest people in their class, or they're not quite the most unfit and most unathletic people. So I think that this seems like a really good plan for people who are kind of in that middle ground that need to now push it to that next level in order to be sufficient to protect our country. And I just want to know how you think that this would apply best to somebody in that position.
Oh, absolutely. All of this research has been done for athletes. None of this has been done for soldiers. But honestly, there isn't a more applicable group than soldiers. All this stuff applies. In a matter of life and death, you want the best training methods. You want the best data. You want the best research to have been done. And all that stems from elite level athletes. And so we can take these elite level athletes and apply it to our elite soldiers. And so you're right. Like these guys are generally normal people that want to go above and beyond. But to go above and beyond, in career or in occupation, there has to be sacrifices made, and they're going to have to go above and beyond in their physical training as well. And so the best way to do this is to use the research and data gathered by elite level athletes and coaches and apply this to our nation's elite. Nothing changes. Nothing's going to change. The best ways to train explosiveness are going to be the same across the board. The best ways to train glycolytic and lactate capacity are going to be the same. The best way to train oxidative capacity is going to be the same. One thing that I do think is different with tactical athletes versus your regular athletes is that things are not as specific for soldiers. Soldiers have to be very well-rounded rather than being good at one thing. Like the best athletes are probably the guys who are the best at one single thing. The best soldiers are going to be the guys that are the best at everything. They're going to be the guys that can lift the most weight and run the farthest, the fastest. And so these are things we don't usually see in the elite level arenas. One area that I have not studied in preparation for this podcast, but I probably will in the future, is how the elite CrossFitters it's how the elite CrossFitters get ready for such strenuous competitions. They are probably the most similar to soldiers in the way they train. You need massive amounts of strength. You need massive amounts of muscular endurance, and you need massive amounts of oxidative capacity to be an elite CrossFitter. I myself am not a CrossFitter, but I do understand the principles of periodization and the principles of building good programs, and I think we're going to see a trend shift in the United States military into making periodization look more like those of CrossFitters. And when I say periodization, I mean having periods or blocks of training that are specific to a stimulus that all build on each other. So you could start with building your aerobic capacity, and then once you have a good aerobic base, you could work on building your anaerobic glycolytic capacity, and then once you have that built really well, you can move on to your maximal strength, your creatine phosphate system. And so all those things will build off each other. Vice versa, if you're very strong and not a good runner, you can start with your creatine phosphate system, train that, move into your glycolytic system, and then once you have a good muscular endurance base, move on into aerobic systems. This is a very simplistic way of looking at how the elite CrossFitters train, and how I think the United States military is going to train in the future.
Great. Well, do you have any final advice for our viewers?
Please don't be scared of how you're going to train. Don't be scared of taking the leap into the elite side of things and doing some research. There's tons of research out there on strength, endurance, explosiveness. Things that can help really everybody, and they're just a mouse click away. They're not that hard to read. So getting through the abstract of your scientific literature is probably the hardest thing to do. But once you actually get into it, it's really pretty simple. It's not that hard, and I think anyone can do it, and I think everyone should do it.
Great.
All right.